إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. صدق الله العظيم. فقال النبي الكريم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم إن يد الله على الجماعة فإن الشيطان مع من فارق الجماعة يرقد أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. أما بعد. When you think about what it means to be part of an ummah, to be part of what the Prophet ﷺ built for us, there is something we have that so many people today are searching for. So many people today are searching for that we often have a tendency to take for granted, which is that people today, more than anything else, more than most things I should say at least, but almost you could say more than anything else, are seeking to be part of something bigger than themselves. You think about it. People, they find their value, they find their worth, they find themselves by being part of something that is not just about them. When an individual lives a lonely life, it's all about them and what they want. You start to feel that. Because we as human beings are social creatures. We desire, we need to have something beyond ourselves. And so people are always looking to be part of something bigger than themselves. Most people, especially those who are not Muslim, try to find it in the things in their lives. That I'm from this school, I studied at this school, so I'm a terrapin, or I'm a husky, or I'm a this, I'm a that. Because they need to be part of something. Or they say that I work for this company, or we're part of this conglomerate, or we're part of this, or we're part of that. People are always searching for something to be part of. They just want to have something that connects them to other people without necessarily needing to even know those people. This is something that we as Muslims are born with. This is something we are born with. That you, when you are born, whether you're in a Muslim family or not, you are born as a Muslim, which means you are part of a congregation. You are part of a community. And by being part of this larger group, the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this allows you to be able to do more. Because most people, when they're searching for that, they can't necessarily figure out what their purpose is, what their goal is, what their objective is. And the biggest thing with the Ummah, the biggest value and benefit with the Ummah, is that we have the idea of unity. Unity. And you hear it and you might chuckle because you're thinking to yourself, well, the Ramadan and Eid, when are those ever unified? And it's true. You're not wrong. But even beyond that, unity is not about uniformity. Unity does not mean that we are all doing the exact same thing. It doesn't mean that we all wear the exact same thing. We're not a cult. You don't all wear the same clothes because, oh, the master says so. We have unity, not necessarily uniformity. What's the difference? Uniformity means that every single person is stripped of their individual identity. That they as an individual do not have value. Rather, it is only the collective that has value. That is what uniformity is. The idea of a military is that you have uniformity. Why? Because then your mass, your large group, seems stronger when there is uniformity. But unity is not about all being the same. It is not about all just falling into the same rows and the same boxes and wearing the same clothes. Unity is there may be differences. There may be things that aren't the same. You may follow one position, one school of thought. Another person may follow another. One person might wear a thobe with short sleeves. Another might wear a thobe with long sleeves. Someone might wear long shorts. Someone might wear pants. Someone might wear a shalwar kameez. Someone might wear a thobe. Differences are fine. There is a high level understanding that we have of what is acceptable. And as long as it is acceptable by the scholars of this ummah, someone legitimate. I'm not just talking about this guy who decided to say, oh, I think I read the Quran and it says this, so I do this. No, I'm talking about someone who studied Islam, who has studied under teachers, who studied under teachers, who studied under teachers, so on and so forth, who all studied under the Prophet ﷺ. That they have the sanad, they have this chain connecting back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we see, when you think about this unity, this idea of unity, when did it exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Well, it existed for a large portion of it. But it didn't mean that they were uniform. The Prophet ﷺ's greatest feat was uniting the Arabs. In our Seerah class on Monday, we talked about this. That the Arabs before Islam were just a group of people that the empires of the world looked at and thought they'll never amount to anything. We don't need to do anything. We'll just leave them be. We'll just let them sit there and exist, and they're going to fight each other. We don't need to worry about them. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came. And with the beginning being his wife, his cousin, his best friend, the first three people to accept Islam, whatever order you want to consider it, from that group, the entire Arabian Peninsula would come to be united in 23 years. Unity. But it wasn't that they all had to do the same thing. It wasn't even that they all followed the same positions. There's a famous narration of the Prophet ﷺ that he said that come to this place and do it before you pray Asr. Come to Banu Qurayza before you pray Asr. And when the companions heard this, one group said, okay, we need to get over there. He said, don't pray, let's not pray. They took it literally. Another group heard it and they said, well, he just meant hurry, let's pray, and then rush over there. And when they got there, they said, Ya Rasulullah, who was right? One of us must have been right. The Prophet ﷺ said, what? He said, you're both right. You're both right. Did they both end up praying Asr? Yes, unity. Did they do it the same way? No, that's not uniformity. Right? This is what's key. And the Prophet ﷺ brought the people together. The Aws and the Khazraj, they were two tribes of the Ansar, or later became the Ansar, the people of Yathrib. And if you understand anything about the history of the Prophet ﷺ, if you understand anything about the seerah, you know that the Aws and the Khazraj had been fighting for generations. They had been trying to kill each other. Okay, I'm not talking about like, oh, they wanted to just prove each other as being lesser or kind of one up one another. No, this was actual hatred. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this. He says that He brought your hearts together and made you brothers by His mercy. He did this for you. وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. You used to be on the edge of a pit of fire. And Allah brought your hearts together. He united you in Islam. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. That when he came, these people heard the message of Islam and they said, okay, you know what? Doesn't matter whether he's from Aws or whether he's from Khazraj or I'm from this or I'm from that. We're Muslim. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The companions accepted it. They said, this is what we will do. Whatever you say, Ya Rasulullah, we will do this. And they followed. They didn't become different. They didn't have suddenly become all with their lineage didn't change. Their background didn't suddenly become, oh, now I'm from Aws, and even though I was originally from Khazraj, or I'm from Khazraj now that I was originally from Aws. That didn't happen. They still maintained their individual identities. But even still, they united. They came together with the Prophet ﷺ. That was a feat that no one thought could happen. And in fact, one of the greatest hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay al-Salul, he was Ra'isul Munafiqeen, the head of the hypocrites. This individual, the reason he had it out for the Prophet ﷺ, the reason he was so angry and constantly trying to belittle and diminish and demean Islam was because he had been poised to become the leader of Aws and Khazraj. He had been in a position where they were going to name him king. But then the Prophet ﷺ came along and they said, yeah, sorry, it's not happening. Right? This is what the Prophet ﷺ was able to do by uniting the companions. And subhanAllah, there's probably no greater example of unity, of pulling people together towards a common goal, no matter their differences, than the hijrah. When the Prophet ﷺ migrated from the city of Mecca, the place he had been born, the place he was raised, the only place he had ever known his entire life, when this time came, do you think that it was a simple thing to just say, oh, you know what, let's just move to Medina, no problem. It wasn't like you had to just get a real estate agent, they sold your house, then you bought a new house in Medina. That's not how it worked. There was no moving truck to take your stuff. This was, we are leaving persecution. So what did that mean? Functionally, it meant that if you as an individual, for your own context, to understand it in your own context, perhaps you migrated to this country, perhaps you're a first generation, second generation, third generation American. Somebody comes to you and says, you have to leave now. We have to leave now. Otherwise, we may be killed. And by this date, you need to abandon everything that you have. You need to leave whatever you can't pack, just leave it behind. And you need to move to this new place where you don't know anyone, where the main commercial element is completely different from what you know. It's like you're moving from New York City to the middle of Kansas. Because Medina, Yathrib, was a farming town. It was a farming culture, whereas Mecca was a trading hub. And then the reality that you can't just take what you own. You don't just get to bring everything because you want to. No, you have to leave a lot behind. This wasn't a simple thing to do. It wasn't like, oh, because we're the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and we can do anything. That's not how they thought. They were human beings. They were struggling with it. They had difficulties with it. Some of them even did it for the wrong reasons. This is what the Prophet ﷺ, in the famous narration of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are by their intentions. This is what the Prophet ﷺ says, that if you migrated for something that was not for the sake of Allah, then you'll get the reward of that. And there's a narration that specifically says an individual did this. He migrated and it wasn't really for the sake of Allah. But even still, there was unity in the fact that they all moved. I'm going to ask brothers, scoot up, please. Fill up space in front of you. Anything you see, inshallah. It's not that it was easy for them. It's not that it was simple. It's that they saw their brothers and sisters being persecuted. Some of them had it okay. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh was not being persecuted. Nobody was going to persecute Umar radiallahu anh. But what did he do? When the Prophet ﷺ said, it's time for us to go, we all have to now leave to go to the city of Yathrib, he didn't say, oh, Ya Rasulullah, I'm all right. I'm chilling. It's good. I'll stay here. He didn't say, Ya Rasulullah, I don't have to worry about anything. You just go ahead. I'm cool. He said, okay, whatever you say, Ya Rasulullah, I'll do it. And his famous narration of his migration is that he effectively went to the Kaaba, prayed 2 rak'at, stood up, and said to the Quraysh, if any of you want to follow me, just go ahead and try it. Just go ahead and try it and see what happens to you. Right? And more famously, I always think about one companion in particular. Because I feel like in our times especially, we could probably relate to this. If you had to just get up and leave everything, your business, your bank account, anything that you own, anything that you had, your home, and these things were not insignificant in value, meaning they were expensive, and you just had to get up and leave, wouldn't be easy, right? Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anh had built a trading empire. I'm talking about empire. I'm talking about someone who was higher than Bezos today. Higher than all these people today that we look at and say, oh, they're so amazing because they're billionaires. He was bigger than that in that time, in Mecca. And what happened? The Prophet ﷺ gave the command, it's time for us to go. He didn't say, Ya Rasulullah, it's kind of tough for me. I got my business here. Everything I own is here. I can't really leave right now. He said, Sami'tu, I heard you and I obey. I hear you and I obey. Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. And he did it. He migrated. famously, understand contextually within Islam, we have a famous example of someone who was part of his people who was also extremely wealthy. Extremely wealthy. But he considered his wealth to be because of himself. And as a result, he disobeyed his prophet. Who was it? Qarun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Qarun. Inna Qaruna kana min qawmi Musa. He was from the people of Musa. فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِمْ. And Allah says that I gave him, he disobeyed, and I gave him so much wealth. So much wealth that specifically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the key just for his wealth was enough to constrain several men. It was that much. And Qarun, he's grouped in with, not with Banu Israel or Musa alayhi salam. He's not grouped in with the believers of his time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Fir'auna wa Hamana wa Qarun. He puts Qarun, this man who was uber wealthy, who had anything he could have wanted, he was not willing to sacrifice. And what happened? He pays the price. He's destroyed with Fir'aun. He's killed with Fir'aun. And he will be raised up as an oppressor. Think about that. It's not like it was easy for Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anh to just walk away. But number one, he accepted what the Prophet ﷺ told him. And number two, Inna yadullahi ala jama'ah. Allah's strength, Allah's might is with the congregation, with the group. When people come together, when Muslims come together and pursue a path, Allah's blessings, His strength, His might is with them. And Abdurrahman radiallahu anh understood this. He didn't say, oh ya Rasulullah, yeah, no, I can't, I have so much here. But subhanAllah, to his credit, when he went to Medina, Allah put such barakah in his decision to leave everything behind that he rebuilt it and increased it from what he had. That again, when he died, his wealth was worth, and I say this without any exaggeration, Google it if you want to, his wealth that he left behind, if you calculate it in today's values, was worth billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. That's what he left behind after leaving it behind originally in Mecca. To unify, to be united with the ummah. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. That he taught us that we as a collective, we cannot go astray by being with the jama'ah. لا يجتمع أمتي على الضلال, the Prophet ﷺ said. My ummah will never gather upon misguidance. And think about it. We see people doing things that we know are wrong. But if everybody here was asked about that thing that you saw was wrong, you would say, that's wrong. Why? Because we are part of this larger group. We understand that as Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, what is right, and we understand what is wrong. And there may be some differences of opinion as to here and there in terms of your fiqh. But all in all, we have a strong foundation that we all stick to. That we all stick to. And this unity allows us to be unlike those of the past nations. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, when Allah says. Those who earned Allah's anger by inventing falsehoods, by making up things, and those who went astray, who worship those that they shouldn't have, who did things incorrectly. That's what protects us. Jama'ah. To be with the group, to have unity. And if that's what helps us, if that's what allows us to continue to be strong as an ummah, we have to double down on that. You have to say, you know what, we need to then come together more. And this is where I want to take a second, brothers and sisters, and highlight something in particular that I see personally. Because I'm always observing, I always want to see what's happening in our communities. And one thing I constantly see is we have a very bad habit of only congregating with those who are of our ethnic background. And to be clear, this is most often happening with those who are older at least, or perhaps those who have come here from another country. That you go to that which is comfortable. But we live in a pluralistic society. We live in a society that is not a monolith. Everybody is different. People have different backgrounds, different cultures, different tongues, different conversation pieces, different ideas of what's right and what's wrong in terms of culturally. And if we allow ourselves to be people who, when we're in a gathering where we are united, like when we stand up, when it's time for salah, we are standing foot to foot, and that's the only time that we have a connection with someone who's not from my ethnic background or from my race, that's a problem. Look at the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They lived in a society that was not necessarily pluralistic. And even still, you had Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anh. You had Suhaib al-Rumi radiallahu anh. You had so many different people. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari radiallahu anh, who was still Arab, but he was from the outskirts. There was an understanding that we are not going to be successful if we try and find reasons to divide each other. If we try and find reasons to remain apart. And famously, there's a narration of the Prophet ﷺ where he says that when there are three people, two should not have a conversation that should cause harm to the other. And scholars have opined from this, that when you have three people or you have a gathering, certain individuals should not suddenly start a conversation in a tongue that is not known to the other people in the gathering. This shouldn't occur. But when we have a gathering at the masjid, when we have Jum'ah, when we have a barbecue, when we have any of these things, so often we have just these times where people, instead of finding new groups, finding new friends, learning about new cultures, as is the reason Allah gave us these different cultures, instead of doing that, we sit with our old boys, we sit with our old friends, and we just talk in our own tongues. We don't go out of our way to include other people. We don't go out of our way to help and learn new cultures, to know about what it is that other people do that's different than us. And the biggest problem with this is that it reinforces an idea that you're still in your home country. That you're still in Palestine or Yemen or Bangladesh or Pakistan or Uzbekistan or Ghana or Mali, whatever it might be. It reinforces this idea that you're still following it. And the world is completely different. It is absolutely different here. And then so often I get people coming to me, more often than not, it's parents coming to me saying, oh, but my son is not doing this, or my son or my daughter wants to marry a person who's not from my tribe, or who's not from this background or that background. And I say, what's the problem? Why is this an issue? Why are you concerned about this? Are they Muslim? Yes. Then that's all that matters. Why are you making this a thing? We don't live in a society where everybody's the same. So don't expect that your children are going to be what you were. You're not living in the same place that you grew up in. So don't expect your children to be the same as you were. This foolhardiness, it leads us to a place where we as an ummah become weaker. Because rather than finding ways to unite, to bring people together, to become stronger, to show that we as Muslims are not Desi, we're not Arab, we're not Uzbeki, we're not this, we are just Muslim. Rather than that, we find reasons to stay in these bubbles. That is not unity. That is uniformity. That is not unity. That is uniformity. This is not what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. And if we cannot recognize this, what I can promise you is this, maybe not in this generation, but if you expect your children to just continue on the legacy that you had when you were back in your home country, if you think that's going to happen, you have another thing coming. And what's worse is too often these children equate the idea of cultural practice of Islam. They equate it with what Islam actually is. And what it leads to is young men and young women, not with their tongues because they don't want to upset their parents, but in their hearts leaving Islam. Because they think, what is this nonsense? What is this stuff that you're making up? I have to put the Quran in my head and spin around 3 times when I'm getting married. I have to put the Quran on a shelf and do this and do that. What is this? This doesn't make any sense. And they leave Islam, maybe not with their tongues, but with their hearts. And you better believe when your grandchildren come, Islam will not be a priority. And when their kids come, Islam will be gone. We need to recognize we're done with back home. We're done with back home. If you want to go there, be there. It's fine. But it's different. And we as an ummah need to find reasons to come together rather than find reasons to remain separated. Oh, I speak this language. Oh, my motherland is this. My fatherland is this, that. Find reasons to be united in a pluralistic society so that the others don't attack us like they do today. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for all of our shortcomings. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لكل مساء المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. I leave you very quickly, brothers and sisters, with three things. No matter what it is that we do, we as an ummah need to remain united, lest we end up like the Prophet ﷺ said, like the scum of the ocean, the foam of the ocean. It's plentiful in number, but in practical usage, it's useless. That practically, it's useless. This is what the Prophet ﷺ said. The time will come when you are plentiful in number, but you're like the foam of the sea. You have no strength behind you. That comes from being disunited. It comes from being separated. Find reasons to be connected, be united. If you have someone you know who's not from your culture, learn more about them. Become closer to them. Be better friends with them. Number two, stay connected with one another and find reasons to connect rather than finding reasons to stay apart. The Prophet ﷺ set up a system when he came to the city of Medina called the mu'akhat system. That people, the brothers of the ummah, the companions of the ummah were set up with individuals who they didn't know, who were now their brothers. And they had a responsibility to them. And they would give them their homes, they would give them their wealth, they would give them whatever they could to try and help them, as if they were their own brothers. And this allowed them to become comfortable with one another. And lastly, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could not care less what your ethnic background is. You are not superior, whether you're an Arab, whether you're a Desi, whether you're from any place in this world, you are not superior to anyone because of your ethnic background. This is not my words. The Prophet ﷺ said this, that an Arab is not better than any non-Arab. The only thing that separates us is taqwa, is your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your recognition and your belief in Him. If we use our backgrounds, our heritage, our culture as reasons to demean and belittle other people, then we will be punished for this. This will be something we're sinful for. And if we use it as a means to learn about and teach other people, this is something that is praiseworthy. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about this in the Quran. If you know someone who's different than you have a friend, someone who's part of an extended family that's from a different background, learn from them. Invite them for dinner. Teach them. Show them. And vice versa. Don't just be disunited. Oh, I'm in my gathering of my buddies who speak my language. That's not united. That's uniformity. Be united as an ummah instead. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for all of our shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite all of our hearts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from arrogance and disunity. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتوب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوا يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا. أقيموا الصلاة.